Welcome to the Global Kinetic podcast. My name is Martin. I'm the CEO of Global Kinetic. And today I'm talking to Dewald, who is the head of architecture and technology for Global Kinetic. Now, recently, Dewald did a blog post around tech debt that did really well on LinkedIn and various other platforms. So we thought we'll have an informal discussion around tech debt, just to expand on some of the ideas that Dewald was talking around in his blog post. Welcome, Dewald. So I think the first thing we need to do is just define what technical debt is. So how would you define technical debt?
So for me, technical debt is anything where you went out of your way to take a shortcut, and then that comes back and bites you later on in life in your coding space.
What about situations where your development team didn't really know what they were doing and they implemented something that is, to use a technical term, crap, and you have to redo it?
Yeah.
Would you say that's technical debt?
That's definitely technical debt. So for me, it wouldn't have been technical debt if the implementation was crappy or less than good. If that was an explicit decision that was made due to some other reason, so maybe there was a need to get to the market quite quickly. Then if there was a compromise in the quality of the code, I would say that's not technical debt. But if the team wasn't know what they're doing, or they made an explicit decision just to write crap code, then that is definitely technical debt.
Okay. And what about, in the 70s, I guess, the word technical debt didn't exist, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But in the 70s, the people who were the computer scientists at the time were talking about entropy and software entropy. In other words, the idea that everything wants to go into a more chaotic state over time, right? So an egg doesn't unbreak itself ever, it only breaks in one direction, right? So software, so in the late 60s and 70s, people realized that software does the same thing. Software, by its nature, if you just leave it and you're not maintaining it, it has a tendency to do this. Would you say if you didn't maintain something in your system for, I don't know, like a couple of years, or maybe, I mean, sometimes it's even less than that, that would also be technical debt, right? Or what do you think that is?
Yeah, so not maintaining your code definitely, or at least an explicit decision not to maintain your code definitely leads to technical debt. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
And sorry, maybe just to the first part of your question. So the technical or the term technical debt was created because eventually you have software entropy, so things degrade. But technical debt, the term was generated or created to explain to non-technical users the impact of that entropy.
Yes, absolutely, because the word entropy in the 70s was more around the physics world, right, and the computer science world. So, yes, I cannot imagine easily explaining that to my mother. But I can explain technical debt pretty easily. The only thing for me, and I know that comes from the late 90s, right?
I think it might have been earlier, isn't it? More 80s.
Okay, but the word debt really has negative connotations to it. And I'm not saying that technical debt isn't a bad thing, but your blog article is around how one can sort of not redefine it, but see it a different way. And we're going to talk about that in a second. I just think that the word debt is, just gives this whole idea so much baggage, and people don't want to deal with it,
Yeah, so the term definitely has a lot of negative connotations. The term, the debt part of the term was generated or created initially just to sort of also highlight the implications of not attending to your code, and it has repercussions. But at the same time, what happens these days is that everything is considered technical debt. So there's the new scope, your business environment change, you need to change features, and everything now that there's a change is considered to be technical debt. And the sort of blanket statement that things are technical debt, that creates that kickback. So
yeah. So if I think about me and what I've done, like in the last 2 years, where I got a lot of flack from our esteemed COO about technical debt in a system that I'm responsible for.
yeah,
Okay. I get that business people want to steer away from technical debt because they see it as a waste of time, and they need product features and functions out to their customers. So, and I know your article is very much around this idea of how do you convince business people that they must actually either slow down or, I mean, the end result is use money to fix that versus just carrying on. And this is a two-part question. I'm sorry about that, but
that's right.
one of our clients, and you will know which one it is, we also had issues where everything was actually perfectly fine. But as they got more users, the scalability became problematic. And it's sort of in the banking world. So at the end of the month, wherever people got paid, it became really, really problematic in terms of managing the scalability and the errors in the system because of the volume of people. And that client specifically wanted to not do technical debt and steer constantly towards feature development, which I do understand.
Yeah.
So what tools does somebody like, I don't know, somebody who's like a technical person like yourself, what tools do you think you and the team have to convince the business people that they need to either slow down or they just need to take the money and then knock on that debt?
Yeah, so I think what we need to do is we need to teach the technical people also to talk about the business case, because eventually the compromises that you need to make or the balancing act that you need to achieve is not just the features, but in also the repercussions of not doing your software maintenance. So in the case of this banking customer, what happened there is that they're driving out features, and as a result, there's no time to do software maintenance. And in not doing the software maintenance then results in not being ready for the future. So you also need to look ahead. So what is important for me is that the technical people, they need to be aware of the business cases and stop talking about technical debt. Because if you go to a business person and you just say, all right, we have this technical debt, we need to fix it, that automatically generates this negative response and the whole process gets shut down. If you were to change the conversation and say that, all right, we're seeing that this feature that has carried us to the first million users, this feature is now getting slower. It's one of our main features in the platform. This is what the people come to use. This thing is getting slower, and if we don't improve it, then we're going to either our growth is going to reduce, or we're going to start losing customers. And all of a sudden, that conversation changed now. And now we can talk about, all right, let's invest some time and money so that we can actually still continue to grow that customer base. But that whole conversation is a very different conversation to just saying, stuff is bad,
Yeah.
I need to fix it.
Yeah, and that's why I said the term technical debt has so much baggage to it. And the moment
Yes, exactly.
you say that, everybody shuts down, right? In this case, even though the client knew that this was problematic, they still tried to push feature development, right? And they were still not that happy
Yes.
about resolving what is, in essence, a scalability issue that wasn't created in a negligent way. It is just the natural way that systems mature, I guess, when you get more and more
Yes.
and more clients.
Yeah. So that to me again is a good example of not really it being technical debt. So what has happened is that this customer's business environment or landscape has changed. So initially they started as a very small they had a small customer base, and that customer base then grew, but they didn't grow the system and change the system to keep up with that. And then that started resulting in technical debt incurring. And again, it's not really technical debt, but the almost the explicit choice not to maintain the software, that sort of starts heaping
And
up to
there
be
was a
technical debt.
choice. There was that
Yes,
choice.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
and then and in this case, what happened is that your scalability at some point hits a point where you can't continue. And that is also where a good example, or it's a good comparison, is technical bankruptcy now. So now you need to down tools and you need to start fixing it as well.
Did you just introduce a new term?
It's not a new term. It's again, it's just a comparison. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
I'm worried about the fact that we're using sort of like finance terms to describe this stuff.
yes.
But
Okay.
I understand that it makes it easy
Yeah.
for people to understand what it is. But yeah, I mean, that was like a NFR. What is that called again? A
Yeah. So what happened there is that I think the NFRs weren't
like
explicit.
a non-functional requirement, right?
That's
NFR is
correct. Yes. Yes.
non-functional
Yes.
requirement. In other words, the stuff that's got to do with scalability and security and so on, not the stuff that has to do with the actual function of the system
That's correct.
necessarily.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just never maintained.
It wasn't maintained, and I also feel it was a bit implicit. So we need to have response times of, say, 500 milliseconds or 200 milliseconds for all customers. And that phrase, all customers, the question is, what does it mean? Is it 100,000 customers? Is it a million customers? And as a result, what happened is that as the customer base grew, the I guess the understanding was that the system will always just cater for all customers, but that's not true. You design a system for X amount of users. You design it to scale to, either you need to design it to be fully scalable, in which case it can handle, well, not an indefinite amount of customers, but a large scale of customers or carry your growth. But if it's fixed infrastructure that cannot grow, then that is typically designed for a fixed number of customers. So what then happens is that if you don't change that, then you don't build out your infrastructure, and the result is that your productivity or response times starts increasing.
So I guess the one thing that you can do as a technical person is that you can define what those points are when you actually need to start looking at those things and get buy-in from the people who make the decisions on that. And that means the business people, not the, I don't know, no offense, head of architecture for the client.
Yeah. But it's and that discussion definitely needs to be had. So, and you're touching on a lot of points there, because on the one side, you can't implement all features perfectly. So there's always going to be some technical debt because there's some unknowns. What is a perfect feature? What is the perfect response time forward?
And quite often you just want to try something out. So you don't actually want to implement it properly, right?
But then what you need to do is you either need to go back and fix it or improve it rather. And then what you touched on now is that you have to have the necessary metrics. You need to be able to monitor that feature. So you need to be able to see that the response time is increasing, that the usage is increasing, so that you can act upon that. And again, having that metrics, that also allows you to make data-driven decisions. And that then, again, changes the conversation, because now you can talk about the business case associated with it and not just say, there's a problem, it's slow.
Yeah, I think it's also about setting the expectation with the business people, right? To say, like, currently these are the things that we expect in the future at these stages to be problematic. And this is what you're talking about in terms of the business cases for those things. So these things might become an issue for us, and this is how we're going to fix it at that point, type of thing. 100%. Versus just as, oh, we're having a sprint for technical debt, which is what I've been in projects before where everybody goes, okay, it's technical debt sprint, but it doesn't actually make sense. Everybody's just doing like whatever they think is technical debt, versus what you're talking about, which is a very specific business case to solve, and part of that is the reason is, or whatever, is technical debt, right? Or there's a problem because of something that historically was implemented in a quick way to get a win, or it's old, or it's just, I don't know, the frameworks have Microsoft or whoever stopped supporting the framework that you're using on your front end or whatever, right? All those different types of things.
And then the other thing that you touched on is that communication, because also you need to plan ahead. You have to have this technical roadmap. So if that is not there, then you also don't know what to build to, and you can inherently sort of start building this technical dip, or rather at the end, you're not planning, and the fact that you sort of implicitly deciding not to plan causes you to incur technical debt later on as well.
So if you had to give some advice to people in terms of technical debt, what would your advice be to technical people and to business people?
I think start talking about the business cases around it. So one is, what I'm not saying is that I'm not saying that there's never going to be technical debt and that everything is going to be perfect. You can't do that. So it's all about the balancing act. So I think be able to talk about the business cases around it, and then also try and keep your software up to date. So make sure that you're still doing the maintenance. So there's this whole concept with the Boy Scout rule of leaving things better or in a better state once you're there. You need to maintain your software. So that to me is the two components. The one is that you manage your technical debt by talking about the business cases and how to improve it. And then the other one is make sure that you don't incur unnecessary technical debt by maintaining your software, and also have the conversations with your business of where you want to go, so you can start planning towards that as well.
Versus just this idea of saying to your business people, oh, we have technical debt, this generic cloud of stuff that we need to have a couple of sprints to resolve, which never flies with those people, obviously.
It's not going to fly. And again, there's this whole negative connotation that goes technical debt, because the first connotation is that somebody did the job wrong initially. And also what tends to happen is that when you had when the stakeholders changed, that also tends to happen much more. Of course, the people don't have the context. So the initial person, they knew when I spoke about all the customers, I was actually thinking about 100,000 customers. And now there's a change in the stakeholders, and a new stakeholder comes in and he says all customers, but that means my 5 million customers that I have now.
Yeah. And you're right, we've had that actually on many occasions where
It does happen.
the stakeholders change with our clients, and then we have to, it's not an education thing, but we have to sort of redo everything from scratch again. And that whole, it is actually that education of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to achieve versus what they're trying to do, which is just get more functionality out for the end users, right?
100%. And that's also why the decision logs and all those things are important to back up those choices as well. But yeah, it tends to lead to difficult discussions.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to tell our viewers about technical debt?
No, I think we covered quite a bit. So yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, thanks.
I appreciate it. So, please feel free to comment, follow our channel if you want, make some comments, go read Dewald's wonderful blog. It's not hugely long, so it won't take like a 5-minute read or something, right?
Yeah.
Go read that and please comment and let us hear what you're thinking. And Dewald, thank you so much for coming to our party.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.